What if the best way to understand today is to step into yesterday? The greatest historical novels don't just tell us what happened, they remind us who we are.
Absolutely, and our guest today has done exactly that.
Welcome to Late Boomers, where we celebrate people who prove it's never too late to create, reinvent, and inspire. I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Whether you're discovering a new passion or writing your first novel, or simply just looking for stories that move you, you've come to the right place.
Today's guest is educator, novelist, and storyteller Dorothy Ward, author of the acclaimed historical novel Light, which impresses. Dorothy explores memory, identity, resilience, and the remarkable strength of women whose lives continue to echo into our own.
Dorothy, welcome to Late Boomers. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
So, Dorothy, many readers love historical fiction, including me, because it teaches history in a really engaging way. Why do you think writing and reading historical fiction is so important, especially today?
Well, it allows us to learn about the past, and it allows us to learn about the past in a way where we see how individuals respond to certain situations in which they're placed. And it allows us to experience what they experience vicariously. And so I think we gain a little bit of objectivity when we're looking at historical fiction, for example. In the novel Light, which impresses, one of the things that happens during the Mexican Revolution, and this is set during the Mexican Revolution, most of it is that there are a tremendous number of refugees who cross into the United States as a result of the violence in Mexico, the starvation that was taking place, the illness. People were forced into the military. And so we can look in the distance and see the sort of strife that people were struggling with, which resulted in their coming across to find a safer location. And that's an issue we're dealing with today. So I think being able to see it from a distance increases our empathy for others.
That's a really good point. The title, Light, which impresses, it's so intriguing. What does it mean and why did you choose it?
Well, I am so glad you asked. This is the novel, Light, which impresses. And if I may read the epigraph, and let me explain.
Sure.
And that's where the title came from. The epigraph was actually a result of my reading a manual, a 100-year-old manual for the Kodak 3A pocket folding camera. And when the protagonist, the main character of the story, is a photographer. And so when I read this sentence in the manual, I thought, first of all, it's beautiful. It's a found poem. And secondly, it so perfectly fit the novel. So if I may read that one sentence epigraph.
Please.
Yes.
The first thing to remember is that the light which impresses the photographic image upon the sensitive film in a fraction of a second when it comes through the lens can destroy the film as quickly as it makes the picture.
Ooh.
And so
that is so much double meaning.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And that's a manual you got with the Kodak in the old days?
Yes. Picture taking with a 3A folding pocket Kodak.
How did you come across that?
I did a tremendous amount of research, and I knew this was the camera of the time and that the main character would be using. She was given.
So what year would that be?
That was in 1911. And so she was given the camera by her beau on her 19th birthday. And so she begins to learn to use it. And so in order for the protagonist to be able to use the camera, I needed to know about it. So in doing research, I came across a manual for the camera. And when I
love that.
I know. It was.
I love that. It's moving. Perfect. It's also completely intimidating. Were you a brand new person trying to learn about photography in 1911, that would scare you so much when you read that little blurb.
Or
It
make
would
you
just
curious.
it would make you terrified that you're going to ruin the film and
True.
ruin the picture and not get a good pic. You
Yeah.
would be so panicked. I think that's really interesting.
Or you'd work very slow. So, so Dorothy, one of the unique features of your novel that I really found interesting is that each section begins with an interview that opens the door to memories unfolding into the main narrative. That's very unusual and super effective, and it's a great storytelling device. What inspired that structure?
Well, I wanted to have the photographer as an older woman looking back and
Oh, yeah.
reliving the past. And so she's famed for her photography. Her name is Sarah Delaney. And
Hmm.
she's famed for her photography of the Mexican Revolution. She lived in El Paso at the time, and for those individuals who aren't familiar with El Paso, we're on the westernmost tip of Texas, and we border New Mexico, but we also border Mexico. And our sister
Mhm.
city is Ciudad Juarez, and we're just a
Mm.
very narrow, shallow river across from each other. And so she was very much involved with the Mexican Revolution and with the photography of the Mexican Revolution. And she was known as a bit of a recluse in her older years. She didn't go to museum openings that focused on her photography. She kept to herself, and there was rumor that she may not even be alive, that she was either physically or mentally debilitated, or perhaps she was no longer even alive. But she suddenly reaches out in 1983, when she's 91 years old, to
Whoa.
two professors who are with the Institute of Oral History at the local university. And she invites them into her home to learn about life in El Paso during the Mexican Revolution, about the tumultuous period and the pain and loss and experiences that she had. And when she invites them into her home, she says, "We both have something to gain from reopening the past." And so the way the novel is set, as you mentioned, Mary, is every section is framed starting with the interview in 1983 and then concluding with it. And the device allows me to do a couple of things. One, it allows me to introduce some of the things that were happening in a sort of a macro way in terms of the Mexican Revolution. And then the center part is the memory of what took place with Sarah. And so then it's the micro. How did those things affect individuals? The
Hmm.
writer William Faulkner wrote something to the effect of, the past is never dead. It's not even the past. And so that going back between 1911, 1912, so forth and so on, back up to 1983, illustrates that point, that the past, what happened in the past, is still affecting us in 1983 and still affecting us today. So that was the reason for the framework.
I love that.
That sounds like a real good method to get into it. And what's the other? There are two remarkable women, apparently, that has your principal characters. So who's the other principal character? And apparently they don't fit the expectations of their time at all. Obviously, if she's a photographer, that would have been very unique to being a woman. But what drew you to creating these unconventional female protagonists?
Well, the second protagonist, the first part of your question, the second protagonist is Catalina, or Cata, and
Uh
she
huh.
is a soldadera in the Mexican Revolution. And a soldadera, and this is something I learned. Actually, what hooked
Wow.
me into the story was in 1983, I actually read a newspaper article about a woman who lived in Ciudad Juarez who said she was a colonel in Pancho Villa's army. And that
Whoa.
fascinated
Whoa.
me. Yeah, and I had no
Whoa.
idea the role women played in the Mexican Revolution. And so I started reading to learn more about it and found out that they played a considerable role. They prepared food, they foraged for supplies, they birthed children and cared for them, they took care of the wounded. but they also picked up guns and fought. And some of
Mm.
them even led troops. And so Cata is a soldadera in the Mexican Revolution. Originally, she's there with her family, but eventually she becomes a colonel in Pancho Villa's army. Um,
Mhm.
why strong, unconventional women? Well, I'm drawn to them. I'm fascinated by women, and I think most women are strong. And I'm fascinated by the strength that women show. But I'm also fascinated by individuals who are resilient. And these two women are very resilient individuals. And I think what interests me will also interest both men and women readers, characters who are
Mhm.
strong, who are unconventional, and who are resilient.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I find that really fascinating because people think that women of the past really didn't make a difference, but many did, and it's wonderful that you're writing about them. And so your major characters then were inspired by real figures. Did you how much did you va vary from the real truth, or did you actually go absolutely according to fact?
No, in truth, the woman who was the colonel in Pancho Villa's army, I actually tried to interview her. There was an article in the local paper, and so the journalist provided her address. And my father was a history buff and a photographer, and so we went over to Juarez with two other individuals to try to interview her. Unfortunately, she had moved since the time she'd been interviewed, and her neighbors, understandably so, would not give her address to us. I mean, they didn't know us. Strangers show up asking for an address. And so I never
Mhm.
got to meet her. So the story is really all fictional. The only part I took from the newspaper article was a woman who was a colonel in Pancho Villa's army. Um, there were, or I should say, there was a woman photographer who was known for her photographs of the Mexican Revolution. She focused on photographing a lot of the women and a lot of the scenes of how the women were working in the revolution. But she is not a character. The other character that I developed, Sarah Delaney, is completely fictional. Uh,
Really? You made her sound quite real.
no,
Yeah.
she's fictional.
Ah,
Oh, I love that whole
I
setup.
do. Was she drawn from your father being a photographer?
Not intentionally, but probably without thinking I'm doing this because my father was a photographer. It just seemed a way. Well, let me just give you a little bit of a background about the story. I actually started writing it um, in the late 90s, and the Soldadera, Catalina, was the main character. Um,
Ah,
and the journalist wasn't even introduced. I had written about 3 chapters well over about 120 pages. But I ended up getting a new position, administrative position at the university where I worked, and it was a very demanding position. So I put the book aside and didn't work on it again until I
Mm.
retired.
mm,
I continued to
Mhm.
research, but I didn't write. And so once I retired, I returned to the book and I picked up the pages I had written, and I thought, no, I cannot write from the perspective of a Mexican woman fighting for her country. It's not honest. It's not going to be believable. I didn't feel
Mhm.
comfortable with it.
Mhm.
And
yeah,
so that's how Sarah Delaney came into being. I decided, well, then I need a strong character in El Paso that I feel that
Yeah.
I can understand her and understand her emotions and her experiences a little bit better, and the book will
Yeah.
be more honest. And it's not to say that Catalina doesn't tell part of the story. She does. But she doesn't, she's not the main character of the story. Sarah Delaney is.
yeah. Well, how old was the Soledad, the
So
Mexican
that,
when you were going to interview her?
oh, she was probably in her 90s, late 80s, early 90s at that time. So she was an older woman.
Yeah, I
Yeah, that would have been really great if you could have scored that interview.
Oh, I know.
yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Let's talk about your writing process a little bit with us. Are you someone who carefully outlines every chapter before writing, or do your characters sometimes surprise you and lead you in a different direction?
I am not someone who outlines. I know when I started writing, I knew the beginning of the novel and I knew the end of the novel. But
Hmm.
the writer E.L. Doctorow said writing for him was like driving a car at night. That you have your headlights on
Oh,
and you see what's in front of you, but you just see what's in front of you, yet you ultimately make it to your destination. And that was sort of how it went with the novel. In part, it was developed. I mean, I had my characters, but it was developed organically. And by that, I mean, history drove some of the development of it. The events that were taking, the historical events that were occurring in El Paso and in the borderland region impacted the individuals. And so the story was driven in part by how the individuals are impacted and how they respond to the historical events. So knew the beginning, knew the end, knew most of the characters, but they developed organically.
and
Yeah.
so did they surprise you sometimes? Do they like come into a dream and tell you what they're going to say or anything like that?
No, that hadn't occurred, but what did happen is as I'm going to sleep, it's sort of like moving chess pieces. My mind is going through what's going to happen next and who's going to do this and how is this person going to respond. And so there is that. The characters don't leave me alone sometimes, but
Yeah,
no,
so you have to
not
keep
through a
the
dream.
notepad next to the bed.
No,
Otherwise, you can't get
I
to sleep, can you?
well, that's true. And you're right. I do sometimes get up and jot down notes. Yeah, that you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kind of have to, otherwise you won't get back to sleep.
True.
Uh,
Yeah.
Dorothy, we were discussing your research earlier, and obviously it takes enormous research to actually to put out an historical novel, but you can't overwhelm the reader. So tell us about the research that you did do and how you balance the historical accuracy with storytelling.
I did, as you said, a tremendous amount of research. I did a lot of reading. I read memoirs of people who lived in the El Paso region and were involved in the Mexican Revolution. I read novels about the Mexican Revolution. I read newspaper articles from the time. I went to museums. I went to physical locations such as Columbus, New Mexico, which is where Pancho Villa in 1916 attacked the United States at
Mm.
Columbus, New Mexico. Um, I took walking tours with local historians who focused on the revolution. And so we would walk downtown and they would show the different buildings and what took place in these different locations. Um, I did a lot of researching things like the camera. There's a 1913 Roadster that one of the characters drives, and so I had to learn about how do you drive such a vehicle because the throttle, for example, is on the steering column. It's not on the floor like ours is. So
Oh,
learning all those sorts of things as I went along. I looked at photographs. I um, I looked at videos, and a lot of the research I did as I was going along because, for example, that
Mhm.
car, suddenly I needed to know about the car. And so I
Mhm.
researched it while I was writing. So a lot of work done up front, but a lot continued throughout.
Well,
well,
you
do
were
you ever get
uniquely
bogged down in research and not write? It
You
could
know,
be a problem for
that
writers.
is, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There's a point where you know you have, I'm no expert in the Mexican Revolution, but I knew enough to begin writing. And I knew enough to begin presenting key facts, especially in the El Paso area, which is the area El
well, I
Paso
was gonna
wanted.
say you were so uniquely positioned being there in El Paso because that kind of researchability wouldn't even exist in other areas. You could be in Beverly Hills, you couldn't find anything about it. So there you are sitting right where it happened. which is, I'm sure, why you were so inspired to do that, right?
Absolutely. It was my love of El Paso, my love of the history in the borderland region, is what interested me. And you're right. I have photographs that I've taken of the El Paso laundry, which is still exists today, which is a laundry by the border that people climbed onto the flat roof during the Battle of Juarez so they could watch the fighting. And there are
Oh,
pockmarks.
God.
Yeah, there are pockmarks in the side of the building where
Oh,
stray bullets came across and
what?
hit the
That's
And they're
great.
building.
watching the fighting from the
Yes.
building, like, kind a little insane. And was there any particular discovery then during your research that completely surprised you or maybe changed the direction of the novel?
That's a very good question. And right now, there's not anything that's coming to mind, but there were a couple of very interesting incidents that I knew about that are built into the novel because they were so important, I thought. One of them was that Pancho Villa, during the fighting, he captured a train between Ciudad Chihuahua and Juarez, and he put a gun to the head of the conductor and he said, wire the headquarters in Juarez and tell them Pancho Villa's in the area and ask them what to do. And so the headquarters said, bring the train right on back to Juarez. So Pancho Villa loads up his troops into the train and they drive him right into the middle of Juarez. And he gets out of the train and takes the city without many shots at all. It
Huh.
was a Trojan horse,
Oh,
essentially. That
Yeah.
so that
yeah.
was an
That's kind of an
interesting.
interesting surprise, isn't
It
it?
Yeah,
is.
yeah, an
It
I
is.
bet
interesting
that's
piece.
I bet that's not in very many history books yet.
It's in if you're reading Mexican about the Mexican Revolution, it is. But otherwise, you're
Yeah.
right. You don't get a lot. But at the time, it was very well known throughout the United
Oh.
States. It was publicized
Mhm.
because it was such a
Oh.
feat that he accomplished.
Truly is a Trojan horse.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The other piece that I had read about that in a number of places was I mentioned the starvation that was taking place in Mexico. And I've read this in numerous memoirs and memories, interviews, in which people talk about children and old men digging through horse manure in Torreon because the Villistas were feeding their horses corn. And if the horses didn't fully digest the corn, then they were getting the corn out of the manure to make tortillas because they were starving, and that was how they could get grain. So that's
Wow.
built into the story as well. So
And that is quite a story.
yeah,
So
Yeah. Yeah.
you touched on this earlier, Dorothy, and because your story sounds very relevant today as
yes.
it did then. What themes do you hope modern readers will recognize in Light, which impresses?
I I hope people will recognize that, frankly, people are people. There are things that drive individuals to take their lives into their hand and cross borders to try to find safety. We all too often try to identify the other so that we can blame the other for all of our wrongs. And there's a situation in El Paso. There was actually a race riot in El Paso during this period. And it was a result of some engineers going into Mexico because they had been told it was safe to reopen a mine. And so they left from El Paso to go into Mexico. And in fact, the train was stopped, and it was Villa's troops, and Villa's troops got the Americans off the train and killed all but one who managed to hide in the bushes, had been in the bathroom and managed to hide in the bushes, slip off the train. And so that information was brought back to El Paso, and when the bodies were returned to El Paso, there began a race riot because Villa's people had attacked Americans, and therefore everybody who was of Mexican descent was guilty. And so the attaching of all the wrongs on somebody you identify as the other, and that's still something we see today. So
Yes.
those are the kinds of themes that I hope come through, the recognition that people are people, and the need for empathy for situations.
Yeah. And also, as we get older, many of us reflect on memory, how it shapes who we are and how we understand our lives. And memory plays such an important role in your novel. What fascinates you about the relationship between memory and truth?
I think, well, there are a couple of things. I think truth changes with memory. We begin to see
Mhm.
things in a different situation or understand them differently, have a better understanding. And there are a couple of scenes in the book actually where that takes place, and I don't want to disclose them because then it gives away
Yeah.
something that I think will be of a surprise in the book. A couple of things, um, but but people begin to see the past a little differently as they get older and have more
Mhm.
experiences. So I think that truth changes some with memory.
And of course, if you ask two people about the same incident,
Right.
nobody remembers it the same way. Everyone was at a different angle in the perception of it,
That's
just a
right.
completely different angle.
Yeah, it's so
That
true.
always amazes me, how
Uh,
people do not remember the same thing the same way ever.
Never, never. Um, Dorothy, every author stands on the shoulders of writers who came before them. What authors have influenced you, and either you personally, your storytelling, or just your love of reading and books and literature?
Well, there are so many. E.L. Doctorow, I mentioned him earlier.
Mhm.
He
Ragtime.
I was about to say
absolutely
that ragtime.
Ragtime, The March. Yeah, he was tremendous with historical fiction, and he was tremendous at developing that sense of empathy, where once you see characters' lives and you see them from a distance, historical distance, you gain
Mhm.
that empathy for them. He was also tremendous about weaving actual historical figures into the novel, and in fact, I do that with
Oh, yeah.
Thea and with General John J. Pershing. Are characters in the novel actual people that are woven into the fabric of Sarah Delaney's memories because she's interacted with them. So E.L. Doctorow is one. Louise Erdrich is
Oh,
an
yeah, I love
yeah,
her.
Yeah,
yeah. She's a tremendous woman, Native American author
Mhm.
who looks at both the resilience of a people and resilience of people. And
yes.
so she's The Roundhouse and The Sentence, The Night Watchman. Those are some of her books. Tremendous author. Sandra Cisneros. She wrote The House on Mongo Street and
Oh,
Woman Hollering Creek is a collection of short stories.
Mm.
And she looks at strong, resilient women as well throughout her stories. And so she's a very, very fine writer. Alice Walker is another
oh, yeah,
outstanding writer. So
yeah.
there's so many writers that have influenced me.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. Well, many of our late boomers listeners are finally finding time to write the stories they've carried around for years. So, what advice would you give to someone who thinks maybe it's finally my turn to write?
My advice is that one, you're never too old to write, so do it. Um,
Mhm.
when my book was published, it came out when I was 71 years old, and so
Mhm.
never too late to write.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, and I'm going to lean back on E.L. Doctorow again for his advice. He said, "Writing is writing. Talking about writing, outlining, researching, planning to write is not writing. Writing is writing."
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Right, Mary?
Right, you gotta sit down and do it.
there you go.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Well well, before we let you go, Dorothy, let's have a little bit of fun. What's your favorite place to write?
I write in my room. And that's I don't vary it much. That's where I can get quiet and can concentrate, and so that's my focus. I have a desk in my bedroom.
And no
And
windows?
I do have windows. I have windows all around, but I keep my blinds closed because I don't want the
Oh,
distraction. So
yeah. And coffee or tea?
coffee,
Ah,
Okay.
okay. Morning writer or night owl?
morning.
And
I'm
one
not an early morning writer. I usually start about midday. Mid-morning, excuse me.
mid-morning.
agree.
Okay. One historical figure you'd love to have dinner with.
Oh, wow. Probably William Shakespeare.
Oh, wow.
Me
Okay,
too.
I love that. And the best writing advice you've ever received?
Well, I think it was that I realized that good writing is rewriting. And
Huh.
so you need to, get your first draft down. Don't expect it to be a masterpiece, and focus then your energy on reshaping and rewriting. And I took months rewriting Light Which Impresses, and probably cut 100 pages out of the original because I'd
Mm.
gotten a little too far into the weeds with the history. And so that's a good
Yeah.
piece of advice. The other good piece of advice is to read your writing out loud, because especially the dialogue, because you can hear clumsy spots that you don't see when you're reading silently. So reading out loud
Oh,
is helpful.
Yeah,
very
even
good
to a
advice.
reading group. When
Yes,
you really hear it.
yes.
Dorothy, thank you so much for sharing this fascinating journey with us and for reminding us that history isn't just something we study, it's something we experience through stories like yours.
Congratulations to you on Light, which impresses. And we encourage everyone listening to pick up a copy. So, Dorothy, tell us, where can our audience find your book and connect with you online?
Well, in terms of my book, it's sold through Amazon, bookshop.org, just about anywhere where you purchase your books, you can purchase it. In terms of contacting me, I have a website that has both links to the book, but it also has a way you can contact me via email. And so the website is dorothypward.com. So DOROTHYP Ward.com.
That's great. Thank you.
Super.
Thank you. So
Thank you
to our
both.
listeners and viewers, if you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to Late Boomers wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd especially love it if you'd subscribe to our Late Boomers YouTube channel. Leave us a review and share this episode with friends who love books, history especially, and inspiring conversations.
And until next time, remember what we late boomers always say.
It's never too late to rethink what's possible. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.